what you're saying is this is even before the New Testament is written, and we're going to talk about how we know these facts are that close. And you say you're going to use two sources out of the New Testament that will prove your argument, and the skeptics will agree with this.
Right.
What
because if you ask us a critical scholar, who's your favorite author? It'd be a real eyebrow raiser if anybody says anyone other than the Apostle Paul.
Why is he the darling of the skeptics?
He's the darling of the skeptics. Here's a couple reasons. They don't think we know the authors of the Gospels. That's a whole nother subject. But they say, first of all, we know who he is. We know his background. We know where he came from. We know that there are 13 books in the New Testament that bear his name, and 7 of them, minimum, are authentic. What does authentic mean? Well, they'll grant that Paul's books are authentic in this sense. Were they inspired? No. Well, who was he? He's a scholar. If you can believe the book of Acts, he studied under Gamaliel, the best-known Jewish teacher. I think in terms of Paul was probably a PhD in Old Testament. And we know he was sharp, and he's the designate to go around and kind of stamp out Christianity, and doing a good job at it. But he's honest. He could be wrong. This is the critic's view. He could be wrong, but he's not going to lie to you. He's not going to mislead. And so we can trust what he says because it came from his heart. And so he's the person, and of the 13 books that bear his name, 7 of them are unanimously accepted. Now these 7, one interesting thing is they're always the same 7.
Give me guys that accept it.
Who accept it? Everybody.
Okay.
Bart Ehrman, the best-known New Testament skeptic, calls these the undisputed Pauline epistles. Like an undisputed heavyweight champion. No one's going to argue with you. Undisputed Pauline epistles, use them. So back to my dissertation. If I wanted to use these 7 books, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, 1st Thessalonians, and Philemon, if I want to use the text, use them. Doesn't mean they're inspired, but they mean they're great sources. You go for it. And if you don't use the sources with these guys, Bart Ehrman, Rudolf Bultmann, they will cite them back to you to prove a point. So it's a good common ground to start with Paul's material. And the 2 I would like to use would be 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and the end of Galatians 1, beginning of Galatians 2, those 2 texts, which are 2 of the accepted 7 undisputed epistles. So let me show you how powerful just these 2 texts are. First of all, they're Paul. So you're with the top guy, top books, everybody recognizes them. We have Jesus dying in 30 AD. 1 Corinthians is written about 55. Actually, now the date's starting to come back. It might be 53. That is only 23 years after the fact. Now, in Galatians chapter 1, Paul said, I'll do it from this side. Paul is going after Christians, and when he meets Jesus on the road to Damascus, the scholars place it either 2 or 3 years after the event. He said, 3 years later, I went up to Jerusalem. So you just let Paul do the math. He wouldn't mislead. He comes to Jesus at 2 or 3 years. 3 years later, so we're +5 or +6, he goes up to Jerusalem and spends 15 days with Peter, James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul. That's a huge meeting. Bart Ehrman says of that meeting, he says, Paul spent 15 days with Peter and James. Pause. I'd like to spend 15 days. And then Bart Ehrman asks this really incredible question. Where do we get closer to the eyewitness testimony than right here?